It slipped from between the yellowed pages like a secret too heavy for paper. A letter hidden inside a forgotten copy of Pride and Prejudice. Its words, trembling yet elegant, carried the voice of a woman long vanished. A bride who never reached her wedding day. A lover who defied chains. A mother whose child was stolen. Was she murdered, or did she escape? And why, after centuries, has her story found you? This is not just another bedtime story for adults. It is a love story carved in sorrow, a thriller whispered by the dead, a sleeping story that will haunt your dreams and linger in your waking soul. Some books are read, others are never truly finished. It slipped from between the yellowed pages like a secret too heavy for paper. I remember the moment with such clarity that even now, years later, I can hear the faint whisper the folded sheet made as it drifted down onto the polished oak table. The library was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your skin and makes you aware of your own breathing. The dust-heavy air, the smell of leather bindings, the faint creak of a chair somewhere in the far-off reading room. All of it framed that single instant when an old letter broke free from the grip of a book that had been waiting decades, perhaps even centuries, to give up its secret. The book itself was nothing extraordinary at first glance. A copy of Pride and Prejudice, its cover frayed at the corners, the once deep green cloth binding now faded into a sickly shade of olive. The title was barely legible, the gilt lettering dulled and worn by countless hands. It had been shelved high, almost forgotten, on the farthest wall of the library's second floor, a place few people bothered to climb to anymore. I had reached for it almost by accident, or perhaps it was not an accident at all, though I would only come to wonder about that later. My fingers brushed the spine, felt its roughness, and for reasons I could not explain, I slid it free from its dusty slot. The weight of it surprised me. Old books often do. The paper thicker, the craftsmanship sturdier, as if the past believed its words deserved permanence. I carried it to the table beneath the tall, arched window. Afternoon light poured through the stained glass, tinting the room in a faint glow of green and amber. I sat, opened the book carefully, and began leafing through pages that had long since yellowed with age. And then it happened. The letter slipped loose, fluttered, and landed face down before me. For a long moment, I didn't touch it. I simply stared at the object, an intruder in Austen's timeless world. The paper was cream once, but now bore the brown stains of years. Its edges were soft, frayed slightly, as if it had been folded and unfolded too many times. My eyes traced its shape, rectangular, precise, yet fragile as though the air itself could disintegrate it. Slowly, I turned it over. The sight froze me. It was sealed. The envelope, though worn, still carried a hardened blot of wax at the flap, pressed with a sigil I could not immediately place. My breath caught in my throat. Libraries often contain forgotten things, bookmarks, receipts, scribbled notes, but this was something different. This was deliberate, hidden, preserved, and then my gaze found the handwriting. Across the front, in darkened ink, a name had been written. The penmanship was elegant but carried a tremor, as if the hand had been unsteady, or as if emotion had pressed too heavily upon the writer. The curves of the letters were sharp and deliberate, each stroke betraying discipline, but within it lay hesitation. Beneath the name, a date, 1872. My heart beat faster. This was no ordinary note. This was a voice carried through centuries, trapped inside an envelope, waiting for a reader it had never met. And somehow, impossibly, I had become that reader. I sat back in a chair, staring at it, unsure what to do. The library around me seemed to fade, the walls receding into shadow, the silence thickening until it felt as though the entire world were holding its breath. I thought of leaving it, of tucking the letter back between the pages and sliding the book onto the shelf. Pretend it had never slipped, never revealed itself to me. After all, what right had I to intrude upon a message written so long ago? The dead deserve their secrets. But another part of me whispered that secrets, once discovered, demand to be read. My fingers reached out almost of their own accord, brushing against the brittle paper. The sensation was delicate, almost sacred. The roughness of the old envelope met the warmth of my skin, and a shiver traveled through me. The wax seal gleamed faintly in the filtered light. I leaned closer. That symbol pressed into the wax. It stirred something in me, a recognition I could not place. A circle intersected with a flourish of lines, almost floral, almost like a crest. My mind searched the recesses of memory, reaching back into old books, old stories, old places. I swore I had seen it before, though where or when, I could not say. The mystery tightened around me. I lifted the envelope gently, turning it over, examining every crease. The handwriting spoke again to me. Not the words themselves, but the presence of the hand that had written them. The trembling strokes told of someone afraid, or desperate, or perhaps in love, though love has often carried its own kind of trembling fear. I glanced around the library. Empty. No one to witness this small transgression. The stained glass light painted the floor in fractured colors, as if I sat in a chapel, the envelope my sacrament. My thumb hovered over the seal. Should I break it? Should I pry open this coffin of words and release what had been locked away? The debate raged within me. To read was to invade, but to ignore was to deny the very reason the letter had found me. Because I was beginning to believe it had found me, that the book had offered itself up, that the pages had loosened their grip intentionally, that across 150 years, the letter had chosen this moment, this reader. I set it down again, exhaling slowly. My heart pounded, each second stretched, heavy and reluctant. I whispered aloud, though no one could hear me. What do you want me to do? The library did not answer, but the silence seemed to lean closer, urging. My mind began to wander. Who had written this? Why hide it in Pride, in Prejudice of all books? Was it a love letter? A confession? A plea? Perhaps it was nothing at all, an idle note between friends. But no, the trembling hand, the sealed wax, the date etched into the corner, all of it told me this was not casual. This was deliberate. This was final. The date haunted me. 1872, a time so distant it might as well have been another world. A time when carriages still roamed the streets, when gas lamps burned in the fog, when words carried across oceans only by ship. Who had Eleanor been? Who had Thomas been? No, wait, I did not yet know their names. I only had the envelope. But somehow, I felt they were there, waiting within, their lives folded into paper. I pressed the envelope to my palm. The wax seal was cool beneath my thumb. The symbol stared back, daring me to break it. I could almost hear the crack it would make, the release of something long contained. And then, the strangest sensation. I remembered, not clearly, not fully, but a flash, a childhood memory. A book of my grandmother's, bound in leather, with a strange symbol embossed on the cover. The same circle, the same intersecting lines. She had told me once it was the crest of a family she had known, or perhaps descended from. She never spoke of it again, and I, a child, never asked. But now, looking at the wax, I felt the weight of something personal. This was not just history. This was connection. My breath trembled. Was it possible? Could this letter belong to someone tied, however faintly? To me, the thought sent a chill racing down my spine. I reached again, gripping the envelope firmly this time. I tilted it toward the light, the script shimmering faintly where the ink had bitten into the fibers of the paper. The name written there, I had not yet spoken it aloud. Perhaps I feared giving it life. Perhaps I feared that once uttered, the library itself would shudder with recognition. But the name was there, waiting, written in a hand trembling yet determined. And still, I hesitated. The silence pressed deeper, and within it I thought I heard, impossibly, a whisper. Not a sound in the air, but a whisper inside me, curling at the edges of thought. It was not words exactly, but it carried the weight of them. Read me. My skin prickled. I glanced around again, convinced I would see someone watching me, a shadow among the stacks. But the room was empty. Only me, the book, the letter. My hand closed over the seal. My breath caught. I leaned closer. The symbol gleamed, and then I froze. Because the symbol shifted. I swear to you it did. In the flicker of light through the stained glass, the wax seemed to tremble, and the lines of the crest shifted like threads in water. I blinked hard, but the impression remained, the circle deepening, the lines interweaving, forming something more complex, more alive. My pulse raced. I set it back down quickly, the envelope trembling in my hand. This was madness. Wax does not move. Symbols do not breathe. And yet it had. I stared at it, chest heaving. What was this letter? What had I uncovered? The temptation burned hotter now. The need to read, overwhelming. But alongside it, a dread. A sense that breaking the seal would not only reveal words, but unshackle something long contained. The envelope waited, silent, patient. And I knew then, with a certainty that terrified me, that nothing in my life would remain the same once I opened it. The seal gleamed again. That symbol, that cursed, familiar, impossible symbol. I had seen it before, and it would not let me forget. The silence inside the library was unbearable. My hand hovered over the letter like a trembling moth drawn too close to flame. That wax seal, so familiar, so alive in the dim light, glimmered with a faint sheen, mocking my hesitation. And then, with a breath I did not know I had been holding, I pressed my thumb firmly into the hardened wax. The brittle crack echoed louder than it should have, like a pistol fired into stillness. The seal split. The centuries-old spell of silence broke. The flap loosened with a sigh. I slipped trembling fingers inside and drew forth the paper folded within. For a moment, I feared it would crumble in my hands, but it held, fragile yet enduring, as though it had been waiting, patient, expectant, for this very moment. The ink was faded but not gone. Each line bore the ghost of words, their black strokes dimmed into shades of brown. Still, they were legible. The hand that had written them trembled across the page, yet carried purpose, weight. I began to read. To whomever finds these words, if fate is merciful enough that they survive me, I beg you, do not judge too swiftly. I write in desperation, though my heart is full, torn between joy and dread. For love, which should have been my salvation, has become my greatest peril. The words grip me instantly. Love, peril, desperation. An entire lifetime poured into the opening lines. My eyes devoured the script as though the ink itself whispered. I must confess, though the world forbids it, that my heart belongs not to the one chosen for me, but to another. His name is Thomas, and though society brands him beneath me, I swear to heaven, no soul ever shone with greater honor or tenderness. He's my truth. He's my life. If you ever knew love so fierce you would die for it, then you know what I feel now. Yet it is this very devotion that places us in danger. I stopped, my breath faltering. The name, Thomas, slipped into my mind like a ghost. Though I had never met him, the letter carved him into my imagination. A man, poor perhaps, scorned by family, but beloved fiercely by Eleanor. Yes, her name appeared in the flowing signature at the bottom of the page, though I had not reached it yet. Eleanor. The name rang with sorrow, delicate as glass, powerful as thunder. I could almost see her as she wrote, her hand quivering, candlelight flickering against pale cheeks, ink smearing slightly where her tears had fallen. I read on. There are eyes upon us. They watch every step I take, every glance I dare offer him. My family would rather see me entombed than wedded to one they call a traitor. Lies coil around Thomas like serpents, accusations whispered not for justice, but to ruin him, to chain him. And I, what am I if not his defender? Yet even I cannot protect him from the cruelty of those who hold power. They whisper of charges, of imprisonment. They would see him hanged, and if I am not careful, they would see me silenced as well. My hand tightened around the paper. The tone of her confession had already shifted. Love wrapped in darkness, devotion shadowed by danger. Eleanor's words carried the weight of someone standing at the edge of an abyss. I could picture her, an English woman of the 1870s, corseted into duty, shackled by expectation. Yet beneath it all burned a passion that defied the century, a fire that made her take pen to paper even as danger closed in. The letter continued. I'm torn, reader, whoever you are. Perhaps I am writing to myself to steady my courage. Or perhaps I write to you, a soul not yet born, who may someday understand the madness of a love that defies the world. If these words survive, then perhaps so does some part of me. Perhaps my love, fragile though it seems, will not die in vain. Her words pierced me. This was no idle note, no quaint relic tucked into a book. This was the heart of a woman poured into paper, a lifeline cast across time. But then, her tone shifted again. Already I hear them outside my chamber. Footsteps linger where no servant should walk. My window bears smudges as though fingers pressed against the glass. I feel their eyes upon me, unseen, always near. It is not only Thomas they hunt, it is me. For in loving him, I have defied my father, and in defiance, I have birthed enemies. Should they discover where I have hidden these words, they will burn them. They will burn me. A chill swept through me. The candlelight in her chamber, the soft scratch of quill against parchment. I could almost see it. Eleanor hunched over a desk, glancing to the door, fearing its inevitable opening. And what of Thomas? A man painted as a traitor, though she claimed his honor above all? What lies have been woven against him? My mind spun with questions, each heavier than the last. I forced myself onward. If you're reading this, know that Thomas is innocent. He carries not treason in his heart, but only love. Yet those who wish to destroy him will stop at nothing. They would call his every kindness deceit, his every silence rebellion. I am told he will be accused within the fortnight, and though evidence is false, it matters not. A poor man cannot withstand the word of the powerful. Her voice on the page quivered with fear, but beneath it was steel. I have resolved, therefore, that I will not abandon him. Let them do as they will with me. I choose him. Even if my choice brings ruin, I cannot betray my own soul. The intensity of it burned into me. Here was a woman who knew the cost of her devotion and embraced it anyway. Yet the letter darkened further still. But there is more. A shadow moves in these halls, someone who does not belong. I know not their name, nor their purpose, but their presence chills me. They leave marks where they walk, scratches upon the door, candle wax melted in strange patterns. And I have dreamt of a figure that lingers at the edge of the river, watching, waiting. When I wake, my heart pounds as if the dream were no dream at all. I fear I am haunted, perhaps by men, perhaps by something more. I stopped, staring at those words. Haunted, dreams of a figure at the river, scratches at her door. My breath quickened. Was it fear or was it more? Did Eleanor face mere men, or something darker, something that lingered beyond reason? I read faster, needing to know. Thomas does not yet know all. I spare him, for he carries burdens enough. But I have seen the crest, the very symbol you see upon this seal, etched into places it should not be, carved into the wood of my desk when I awoke, scratched into the stone by my window. I know not what it means, but it follows me. It binds me. I pray I imagine it, though my heart whispers otherwise. I fear this symbol marks me, and not only me, but him. The seal, the very seal I had broken, the very one that had seemed alive beneath the light. I felt the weight of it settle over me, as though I too had been marked. I pressed forward, though dread gnawed at me. If these words reach you, stranger, then know, love has placed me in peril, but it is a peril I would not trade for the cold safety of obedience. Thomas is worth the fire. He is worth the grave. And yet, I hear them again. The footsteps, the whisper at my door. I fear, and there it ended. Abrupt, torn. The ink bled at the edge, as though the quill had been ripped from her hand mid-stroke. I sat frozen, the letter trembling between my fingers. The silence of the library pressed close again, heavier now, almost suffocating. My heart pounded as though I had run miles. Eleanor's voice had carried me into her chamber, her heart, her fear, and then it had been stolen away, mid-sentence, snatched into silence. The letter ended not with closure, but but with absence. A life cut short, a voice silenced, a truth withheld, and I could not escape the terrible certainty that the very footsteps she wrote of, the very whisper she feared, had come for her at that moment, tearing her words from the page. The torn edge stared back at me like an open wound. I swallowed hard. My hands trembled. The seal, the symbol, the date, the name, Eleanor, Thomas, danger, love, betrayal. The letter had given me enough to know this was no idle romance. This was a warning across time, a voice reaching through dust and decay to say, beware. And now, as I sat in the fading light of the library, the torn letter in my hands, I realized something dreadful. I had only the beginning. The rest was missing. The letter lay before me, its words carved into my memory like scars on stone. Eleanor's voice, fragile, desperate, yet resolute, had poured from those faded lines, and then, just as suddenly, it had been silenced, torn away mid-sentence, stolen by unseen hands or unspoken fate. But it was not only the unfinished words that haunted me. It was her presence. I felt her with me still. Not a ghost, not exactly, at least not in the way we imagine ghosts, but something more subtle, more insistent. A weight on the air, a pull on my thoughts, a whisper just beyond hearing. The name, Eleanor, echoed in my mind as if I had known it all my life. It carried a strange familiarity, though I could not recall ever reading of her before. And yet, something in me resisted the idea that she was merely a stranger lost to history. That night, I could not sleep. My bed was no refuge, my eyes no shield against the images that burned behind them. I saw her candlelit chamber, her trembling hand, the ink pooling where her quill faltered. I heard the phantom footsteps at her door, the scratching on her window, and I heard the last words she managed to write before her letter ended in silence. Fear. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. The library's archives were not vast, but they were deep. Records slept in drawers of oak and cabinets of brass, bound in ledgers whose leather was cracked with time. Old newspapers, parish registries, legal documents, fragments of lives long extinguished but not forgotten. I began my search with trembling hands, the name Eleanor my only compass. At first, there was nothing. Dozens of Eleanors, scattered through baptisms and marriages and funerals. Women who lived ordinary lives, whose stories began and ended without mystery. But then, at the bottom of a fragile registry book dated 1872, the name appeared. Eleanor Wickham. The ink was darker than the rest, as if pressed harder into the page. The entry was brief. Daughter of Lord William Whitcomb, born 1849, unwed. No further details. No death recorded. I traced the name with my fingertip, my chest tightening. Eleanor Wickham. She was real, not a phantom invention, not a trick of my mind, but flesh and blood once. Further records told more. The Whitcombs had been an old family, wealthy landowners who lived in a grand estate on the outskirts of London. They were mentioned in society pages of the time, banquets, marriages, political dealings. But Eleanor's name appeared only in whispers, never at the forefront. A daughter mentioned in passing, as though her existence was an afterthought. And then silence. After 1872, Eleanor's name vanished from all records. No marriage announcement, no obituary, no will. It was as though she had dissolved into air, leaving no trace but the faintest of rumors. Those rumors lived in the brittle newspapers I sifted through next. A column dated November 1872 spoke of strange absences at the Whitcomb estate. Another article mentioned a scandal unspoken, hushed by wealth and power. And then, buried in a tattered journal of local gossip, one chilling line. The bride who never was, the lady who vanished, whose chamber was found deserted and whose bed bore no imprint. My heart pounded as I read those words. A vanished bride, a woman who disappeared without explanation, whose name was erased by the silence of privilege and shame. It was her, Eleanor. The letter was no invention. It was the testimony of a woman the world had tried to forget. I leaned back in the creaking chair, the papers trembling in my hand. The morning light through the archive's narrow windows seemed colder now, paler. Eleanor's story was not simply a tale of love. It was tragedy, a tragedy the world had buried, but which had clawed its way back into the present through a letter hidden in the pages of a book. Why me? Why had I found it? Of all the readers, of all the hands that could have opened that book, why had it been mine? The question gnawed at me as the hours passed. I should have felt satisfied, her existence confirmed, her fate at least partially uncovered. But instead, I felt unsettled. The unfinished letter still lay in my satchel, its torn edge like an open wound. She had begun a story, and I had been chosen to hear it. But without the ending, it was agony. And worse still, I could not shake the feeling that the letter had not only been written for someone or time, but for me, that across the chasm of years Eleanor had reached, and somehow, impossibly, our hands had touched through paper. I closed the ledgers, my decision made. I would return to the book. The library was quiet when I entered again that afternoon. Dust floated in the still air, motes glinting in shafts of pale sun. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, my pulse quickening as I neared the farthest shelf. The copy of Pride and Prejudice still lay where I had left it. Its faded green cover seemed to watch me, patient, as though it had expected me to come back. I sat at the same table, the same arched window pouring its colored light across the wood. I opened the book carefully, almost reverently. The pages whispered as they turned, brittle and yellow, their margins spotted with time. The place where the letter had been was now empty. A hollow space in the story, a scar in Austen's words. I slid my hand deeper between the pages, as though searching for something more. And that was when I felt it. Another fold of paper wedged tight against the spine, deeper than the first. My breath caught. I eased it free, heart hammering, and laid it upon the table. It was smaller than the letter. A mere slip, folded once, its edges frayed. No envelope, no seal, just a square of paper faintly yellowed. My fingers unfolded it with trembling care. There, in sharp strokes of black ink, were 4 words only. Meet me at midnight. I froze. The words stared back at me. Simple yet heavy, carrying a weight that pressed against my chest. Midnight, an hour of thresholds, of endings and beginnings, of silence and shadow. Why hide such a note inside a book? Who had it been written to? Thomas, perhaps, her forbidden love, or someone else? And why had it been concealed so carefully, hidden alongside the longer confession? The message burned into my mind. Meet me at midnight. It was not only a note from the past. It felt like a summons. The library around me darkened, the colors of the stained glass fading as the sun fell lower. Shadows lengthened across the floor, reaching like fingers toward the table where I sat. For the first time, I wondered if I had gone too far. If by breaking the seal, by reading Eleanor's words, I had not only uncovered history, but awakened something that had been meant to rest. Yet I could not stop. The slip of paper trembled in my hand, the inked words etched into me like a command. And though I told myself it was foolish, though I told myself it was nothing more than an artifact of another time, I knew what I would do. I would obey. I would meet her at midnight. Midnight, the very word carries weight, doesn't it? It is not simply an hour, but a threshold. The moment when the day dies and something else stirs in its place. The world holds its breath, caught between what was and what is not yet. Midnight is when time itself feels thinner, when shadows lengthen into shapes they should not hold, when silence becomes a language of its own. And that was when the letter summoned me. Meet me at midnight. For words, scrawled on a slip of paper hidden deeper in the book than even Eleanor's desperate letter. For words that could have meant anything or nothing at all. A clandestine meeting with her forbidden love, perhaps. A signal to Thomas, urging him to steal her away under the veil of darkness. Or perhaps it was nothing more than a fragment of memory, left to rot in paper and dust. But I did not believe that. Not anymore. Because ever since I had broken that wax seal, I had felt it, her presence. Eleanor's trembling hand had reached not just across her own time, but into mine. Her voice whispered through ink. Her fears still clung to the torn edge of her letter. She had chosen me, whether I understood it or not. So when the clock tower outside struck 11 and the streets fell quiet, I rose from my bed, dressed, and made my way back to the library. The city was hushed at that hour, emptied of its crowds, its carriages, its commerce. The lamps lining the streets glowed faintly in the mist, and each echo of my footsteps seemed too loud, as though the stones themselves resented my passing. Windows of shuttered shops stared blankly, reflecting only the fog and my shadow. I kept my eyes forward, but I could not shake the sensation that I was being watched. Not by men, perhaps, but by the hour itself, by midnight approaching. The library loomed ahead, its Gothic arches black against the pale moon. The great doors stood as they always did, but when I pressed against them, they yielded with surprising ease. I stepped inside, the air immediately heavier, colder. The scent struck me first, old paper, dust, and something else. A faint metallic tang, like rust or dry blood. The silence was not the silence of daytime study. It was deeper, older, as though every word ever spoken inside those walls had been swallowed into the dark. My footsteps fell hollow on the stone floor as I crossed into the grand hall. Moonlight seeped through the high stained glass, painting the marble with fractured colors that shifted as if alive. I climbed the staircase, each step creaking under my weight, though I swore it had never creaked before. The higher I went, the more oppressive the air became, as though the library were watching me intrude. At last I reached the second floor, the farthest shelf where the faded copy of Pride and Prejudice had waited. There it was, resting on the table beneath the arched window, exactly as I'd left it, though I could not remember leaving it there. I was certain I had returned it to the shelf, but here it lay, patient, expectant, like a host awaiting its guest. The clock tower outside struck once. 11:30. I sat at the table. The book seemed to breathe in the silence, its frayed cover glinting faintly. I opened it again, leafing through the brittle pages, though I knew no more secrets lay within. Only Austen's words, familiar and timeless, marred by the absence of Eleanor's letters. Still I waited. The minutes crawled. The air grew colder. The shadows in the corners stretched, bending unnaturally as if pulled by unseen strings. The silence thickened, pressing against my ears until I thought I would go deaf from the absence of sound. My hands trembled on the table, my breath shallow, and then the clock struck 12. The chime rang through the city, reverberating against the stone walls, echoing deep into the library's bones. With each toll, the air seemed to shift, heavier, thicker. I felt it then, the unmistakable sensation of being joined. I was not alone. The shadows quivered. The air stirred, though no window was open. And faintly, beneath the dying echo of the 12th chime, I heard it, a voice. So soft at first, I thought it was only my imagination, a trick of nerves. But then it came again, clearer, carried not by the air but through it, as though the very walls exhaled words. It was a woman's voice, low, trembling, but beautiful. It was not the crisp tone of the present, but the careful cadence of another century. Her syllables lingered, each one heavy with longing and sorrow. My heart pounded, my body frozen. I leaned forward, straining to hear. The voice grew nearer, though I could not place its source. It did not come from the hall, nor the shelves, nor the stairwell. It came from everywhere and nowhere, weaving through the silence like thread through cloth. I closed my eyes, and in the darkness, the words came clearer. It was not a sentence, not a greeting, not even a plea. It was a name, Thomas. The single word shivered through me, soft as a sigh, sharp as a blade. My eyes flew open. The library stood unchanged, empty, still silent, and yet the sound lingered, echoing inside me. Thomas, her love, her danger, the man for whom she would risk everything, for whom she vanished. The library returned to silence, but it was not the silence of before. It was heavier, denser, as though her presence had pressed into every shadow. My hands trembled as I gripped the book, my breath ragged. Eleanor had spoken. Not across paper now, not through faded ink. She had spoken here, in this place, in this hour. Midnight had opened its door, and she had stepped through, if only for a moment. And her first word, her only word, was his name. The silence after the whisper lingered like frost in my chest. Thomas. The name had cracked open the midnight stillness, leaving me trembling in the library's embrace. I clutched the book tighter, as if it alone tethered me to reality. Yet even as fear prickled at the back of my neck, I knew this was only the beginning. For in that instant, when her voice slipped across time, the letter itself seemed to stir. The brittle envelope on the table fluttered, though no draft touched it. The folded page I'd already read, with its torn edge, its ink faded by years, shifted beneath the moonlight. And then something impossible happened. Under the glow of the tall window, the ink darkened. The faded brown strokes bled back into black, as though an unseen hand retraced them. And more lines began to form, curling and stretching across the page where moments before there had been nothing. I leaned closer, my breath shallow, my eyes wide. New words were appearing before me. The quill of time had not ceased. Eleanor was still writing. The letters were elegant but hurried, as if drawn with desperation, with the urgency of one who feared every second might be stolen away. My hands trembled as I held the page to the candlelight, afraid the words would vanish if I blinked. And then I read, "Forgive me, stranger, for I know not your face nor your hour. Only that if my words reach you, then time has been kinder to you than to me. I must continue, though every line is a dagger to my own soul. For love, my love, is forbidden." The letters curved across the page, glowing faintly in the candlelight, as though each stroke carried a heat long after it was written. My chest tightened. She had begun her confession anew. His name is Thomas. He is not of my station, where I am bound by silks and marble halls. He is bound by calloused hands and earth beneath his nails. The world calls him beneath me, unworthy of even my glance. But I tell you, he is worth more than all the wealth and power my family hoards. He is truth. He is gentleness. He is the only soul who sees me, not as a pawn or an heir, but as a woman who breathes. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining her, Eleanor, trapped in the grand halls of her family's estate, smothered by corsets and chandeliers, surrounded by men who measured her worth in dowry and inheritance. And then Thomas, a man the world would scorn, but whose touch had taught her what it meant to live. The ink continued. They call him traitor. They spread whispers that he has conspired against the crown, that he plots in shadows, that his words are poison. Lies, all of them. Lies spun by those who wish to break us apart. I have seen his heart. I have walked with him by the river and heard his dreams of freedom, not rebellion. But in this world, freedom itself is treason. I felt a shiver travel down my spine. The charge of treason in 1872 was not a mere insult. It was a death sentence. They had not only condemned Thomas for his class, but painted him as an enemy of the state. And Eleanor, by loving him, had bound herself to his ruin. The candlelight flickered as though agreeing. My father does not forgive. He has promised me to another, Lord Hensworth, a man of his choosing, thrice my age, his pockets deep, his influence powerful. I am to be wed to him within a month. My family rejoices. They call it a fine match. They call it duty. They call it salvation. But what they call salvation is my prison. And I cannot bear it. The words blurred as my eyes burned with unshed tears. I could hear her voice as I read, not in sound, but in rhythm, in the desperate pulse of the sentences. A woman trapped in silken cages, her heart clawing at the bars. I told Thomas we must flee. He begged me not to risk it, for he fears what they will do to me. But I cannot betray him. If I must marry another, I will be no more than a corpse walking. My body may stand at the altar, but my soul will already be buried. The ink pressed heavier here, the strokes darker, as if her hand shook with defiance. And so I write these words as a confession and a vow. If ever they silence me, If ever they claim I chose duty over love, let these words bear witness. They lie. For I have chosen him. I will always choose him. I pressed the page against my chest, my heart pounding in rhythm with hers. I could feel the agony woven into every line, the kind of agony only love can birth, when the very thing that gives you life is also the thing that condemns you. The candles sputtered, shadows rippling across the shelves, and still the words came. Even now, preparations are made. The dress is sewn, the invitation sealed. My father watches me as though I am his property to deliver, not his daughter to cherish. I cannot breathe in these halls, these walls. Every corner whispers obedience. Every doorway chains me tighter. They say I am fortunate. Fortunate to be wed to wealth while my heart is torn from my breast. What cruelty calls fortune what I call death? I could almost see her, seated at her writing desk in that estate, the candle beside her guttering as she poured her soul on a paper. Her hair unbound, her eyes rimmed with tears, her quills scratching furiously even as footsteps prowled the corridor outside. They call Thomas criminal, but it is they who are guilty. Guilty of murder of mine. For what is a woman's life worth if she cannot love? What is a woman but a shadow if she is given to a man she does not choose? Her words were fire. Centuries could not cool them. And then her stroke slowed. The ink grew faint again, as though her strength was faltering. The candlelight flickered low, and for a moment I feared the words would stop, unfinished, leaving me in silence once more. But her hand pressed forward. If you find this letter, know this. I chose him. I chose Thomas. Even if it meant my death, I chose him. The final words deepened on the page, darker than the rest, as if carved into the paper with all the strength she had left. And then nothing. The ink stilled. The paper grew cold. The silence returned. I sat there, breathless, my eyes locked on the final line. Even if it meant my death, it was not simply a confession. It was prophecy. Eleanor had vanished in 1872. History had recorded no marriage, no funeral, only absence. She had chosen love, and for it, she had disappeared. I felt a chill seep through me. This was no idle story. This was a grave written in ink instead of soil. And I had stumbled upon it. The library around me seemed to close in. Shadows lengthened across the floor. The silence thickened until my heartbeat was the only sound. The candle sputtered once more, its flame bending toward the paper as though drawn by her words. And in that silence, in that fragile space between light and shadow, I swore I heard it. Her voice, faint, trembling but resolute, repeating the line I had just read. I chose him, even if it meant my death. The whisper shivered through me, sinking into my bones. I pressed the letter flat on the table, my fingers trembling. The ink glistened faintly, as if still wet. And I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that Eleanor's choice was not merely history. It was unfinished. Her story was not over. The words still trembled on the page where Eleanor's hand had left them. I chose him, even if it meant my death. I sat in silence, the candlelight flickering weakly, the air thick with her vow. That sentence echoed not only through the paper, but through me, its weight unbearable, its finality like a tolling bell. She had chosen Thomas. She had chosen love. And by the whisper of her voice in the midnight air, I knew she had paid dearly. But what had happened to her? What had become of Eleanor Whitcomb, whose words still bled across time? The hunger for truth gnawed at me, more relentless than fear. I could not let the story end here, with torn pages and whispers in the dark. I had to know how her tale concluded. So I turned once again to the archives, where history lay buried in dust and silence, waiting for someone willing to dig through its grave soil. I searched for her name with a desperation that mirrored hers. Eleanor Whitcomb, daughter of Lord William Whitcomb, promised to Lord Hensworth, vanished in 1872. It was not in the official records that I found the truth, but in the whispers of the newspapers, the hushed tones of society columns, the scandal sheets that thrived on stories too dangerous for polite conversation. And there, woven between gossip and ruin, Eleanor's name surfaced like a drowned body rising to the river's top. They called her the missing bride of London. The phrase struck me with its cruel poetry. She had not been remembered as Eleanor, not as a woman with a heart or a soul. She had been reduced to a title, a headline, a ghostly figure in a white gown that never walked the aisle. The reports painted fragments. Her wedding to Lord Hensworth was arranged, invitations sealed, the church adorned with flowers. On the eve of the ceremony, she retired to her chamber, her gown laid out, her jewels prepared. Servants spoke of her calm demeanor, her quiet obedience. But when dawn came, her bed was empty. The window was locked. The doors were bolted from within. Her dress remained untouched, and Eleanor herself was gone, vanished without a trace. Panic swept the Whitcomb estate. The family refused to speak of it, silencing the staff with threats and payment. But the city whispered. Some said she had run away with her lover in the night, fleeing across the channel to France. Others claimed darker tales, that Lord Hensworth, shamed and enraged, had seen to her silence himself. There were whispers of strangulation, of burial in secret ground. Others still believed her family had hidden her away, shut behind convent walls to preserve their reputation. But the cruelest rumor was the one that lingered longest, that her body had been cast into the river and the currents had carried her away. I read these words in the dim glow of the archive lamp, each account striking like a blade. She was no longer Eleanor, the woman who had bared her soul in ink. She had become legend, her humanity swallowed by myth. A scandal, a story, a curse. For in the years that followed, tragedy clung to the Whitcomb name. Lord Hensworth died within a year of her disappearance, his fortune squandered by lawsuits and debts. The Whitcomb estate itself burned in a fire whispered to have no natural cause. Servants swore they saw her figure in the halls, her gown drifting in smoke before the flames consumed the walls. The family dwindled, its line broken, until nothing remained but the echoes of its wealth. And always, when her name surfaced, it was not in kindness, but in curse. The missing bride of London. I closed the brittle newspaper, my hands shaking. To love was her crime, and for it she had been erased, silenced, remembered only as a mystery. But I could not forget her. I could not let her remain only what history decided. For I had her voice, I had her letter, I had her vow, and yet I could not escape the dread that she herself lingered still, unquiet, reaching across decades to finish the tale through me. The candle on my side flickered violently, though no draft touched it. Shadows lengthened across the library shelves, bending in unnatural angles, stretching toward me as if drawn by her name. I pressed my palms against the table, grounding myself. The words blurred in my vision, but my mind spun with clarity. This was no coincidence. Her letter had been hidden in that book for me to find. Her whispers in the midnight air, her vow inked anew under candlelight. They were not relics. They were pleas. But for what? For remembrance? For justice? For release? The silence pressed tighter. The room grew colder, the air damp like stone walls after rain. My breath came in shallow clouds, visible in the dim glow. The candle sputtered again, nearly extinguished before flaring back, casting shadows that danced along the shelves. And then I saw it, a movement. At first I thought it was only the shadows shifting, the tricks of weary eyes and failing light. But no, this was different. This was deliberate. By the row of shelves beyond my table, a figure stood. I froze, my body rigid, my pulse hammering in my throat. It was a woman, tall, slender, her outline draped in the shape of a gown. The folds of Victorian dress hung still around her, though no fabric should have survived here. Her hair was pinned high, her posture straight yet fragile, as though she bore both dignity and sorrow in equal weight. She did not move. Her face was hidden in shadow, her form only half lit by the trembling candlelight. But I knew before reason could protest. Eleanor, the missing bride of London. Her shadow lingered between the shelves, watching, waiting, and in that unbearable silence, I realized her story was far from finished. The figure stood among the shelves, unmoving, cloaked in the quiet sorrow of another century. My candlelight trembled, throwing shards of glow across her dress, layers of fabric from an era long buried, the lace stiff with shadow. Her outline seemed more suggestion than substance, but her presence filled the room heavier than any mortal could. I knew her name without needing to ask. Eleanor, the missing bride. For a breathless moment, we stared at each other, I in flesh, she in memory, and yet something deeper tethered us. Then, without a word, she turned. Slowly, deliberately, her silhouette glided deeper into the rows of books, toward a part of the library I had never ventured. My body resisted. Every instinct screamed not to follow, that shadows should not be trailed when they move with purpose. But the letter, her voice, her sorrow, they pulled me like a chain around my heart. So I rose, holding the candle out before me, and stepped into the silence after her. The floorboards groaned beneath me, the sound echoing far louder than it should have. Eleanor's shadow slipped gracefully ahead, always just out of reach, her dress brushing against shelves without disturbing a single speck of dust. She moved with the inevitability of moonlight, leading me where I had no choice but to go. The air grew colder as we passed beyond the familiar aisles into a darker wing of the library, a forgotten corridor where cobwebs clung to the corners and the air stank of neglect. These shelves bore books no hand had touched in decades, their spines gray with dust, their titles obscured. The further we went, the more it felt as though I were stepping out of the world I knew and into one made of whispers and ruin. And then she stopped. Her silhouette lingered at the end of the row, her head bowed as though in grief. And there, on a table untouched by dust, lay a single book. I knew it before I touched it. Pride and Prejudice, identical in every way to the copy I had first opened. The same faded green binding, the same frayed corners, the same weary weight of centuries. Yet this one was impossibly pristine. No dust, no cobweb, no sign of time's cruel hand. It had been waiting, preserved for this moment. For me, with trembling hands, I opened it. The pages whispered, brittle yet unspoiled, and from between them, folded neatly, lay another letter. I drew it out carefully, my pulse hammering, the flame of the candle guttering with anticipation. The envelope was torn, its wax seal broken long ago, but the paper inside was intact, its ink still legible, though faded with age. I unfolded it, the air around me tightening, and began to read. If you have found this, then my first words were not enough, and my vow has not silenced what pursues me. Forgive me, stranger, for what I must reveal now may burden you as it has burdened me. But truth must live, even when I do not. The handwriting was hers, Eleanor's elegant strokes, steady despite the desperation woven through them. You know now that I loved Thomas, though the world condemned us. But love, as fierce as it burned, was not the only bond between us. I write now, in trembling confession, though the ink itself feels like betrayal should it fall into the wrong hands. I carry within me his child. My breath caught. The words glared up from the page, shocking in their intimacy, devastating in their weight. I have not told him. I cannot. To speak it aloud would place him in greater danger, for my family would seize upon it as proof of my ruin. They would call the child illegitimate, a stain upon their name, a curse upon their fortune. They would strip it from me before it ever drew breath. And so I have borne this secret alone, each day heavier, each night longer. But it is love, not shame, that grows in me. It is hope, though the world calls it sin. The words blurred as I imagined her. Eleanor, carrying a secret life inside her while walking through the halls of a house that sought to imprison her. The weight of silks on her shoulders, the weight of her father's will, the eyes of servants watching her every step, and all the while, her heart clinging to Thomas, her body nurturing the very child they would have despised. She wrote on, "The marriage they force upon me is not salvation, it is my gallows, and yet I have smiled, nodded, played my role, while beneath the fabric of my gown, the child stirs. They know nothing. They must never know, for if they discover it, neither I nor the babe will live to see the morning. Her sorrow poured from the ink, but so did her strength. I do not fear death for myself, though it chills me. What I fear is silence, that my child's name will never be spoken, that their life will be erased before it begins. So I beg you, whoever reads these words in whatever time you breathe, protect this secret, guard it, remember it, for I carry Thomas's child, and in that child, our love will outlive every chain. The candlelight shuddered, casting the shelves into strange, distorted shapes. My hand trembled as I turned the page, desperate and afraid of what came next. I cannot flee. They watch too closely. The doors are locked, the windows barred. But I will not yield. If I must vanish, let it be known that I vanished for love, not for shame. For love is no crime, though men may call it so. If this letter is all that remains of me, then let it bear witness. I loved Thomas, and I bore his child. Whatever fate comes for me, let it not come for them. Her words struck me like thunder. Eleanor had not only carried the burden of forbidden love, but the greater, more dangerous truth of a child conceived in defiance of her family's will. It explained the silence of the records, the vehemence of the Whitcombs, the curse that had consumed their line. They had not simply lost a daughter, they had tried to erase her. But she had left this letter, this plea, so her truth could not be buried. And then, the final lines. If you have read this far, then know one last truth. The child survived. They lived, though not in my arms. They were hidden, carried away, raised where no Wickham eyes could see. But blood calls to blood, and what hunted me will hunt them. It will find them. And if you're reading this, then they will find you too. My hand froze. My breath stopped. The words on the page seemed to pulse with a life of their own, the ink shimmering faintly as though written anew. The silence of the forgotten wing pressed in around me, heavy, suffocating. The child survived, and they will find me too. I lowered the page, my hands trembling, the shadows of the library quivering with me. Across the aisle, Eleanor's silhouette lingered still, her head bowed, her dress stirring though no wind touched it. And in that silence, I knew she had not brought me here to frighten me. She had brought me here to pass on her plea, to ensure that her truth, her love, her child would not be erased again. But her warning was not only for the past. It was for now, for me. The candle guttered, nearly extinguished, and in its dying light, Eleanor's shadow lifted her head. Her face was still hidden, but I felt her eyes upon me, watching, waiting. The words seared themselves into me, every curve of ink carrying the weight of revelation. The child survived, and they will find you too. For a long while, I could do nothing but stare. My fingers clutched the brittle paper until it nearly tore, my breath coming shallow, uneven. The shadows around me pulsed with a presence I could not name. Eleanor's vow, her plea, her confession, they had already felt alive, but this was different. This was not merely the voice of a long-dead woman. This was a thread woven into my own life. The child survived. That child had lived, hidden, carried away beyond the reach of the Whitcomb's wrath. And if that child had survived, then they had descendants. Blood that had flowed in Eleanor's veins had flowed onward into others, into generations, into time itself, into me. The thought shivered through me, terrifying and irresistible. Could I, by some cruel twist of fate, by some design deeper than coincidence, be her descendant? It seemed impossible, absurd. And yet, hadn't everything about this journey been impossible? Letters writing themselves under candlelight. Shadows of missing brides leading me into forgotten corridors. Voices whispering names across centuries. I felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. This was no accident. Eleanor had not chosen me at random. She had chosen me because I was hers. The library seemed to sense the shift in me. The air grew tighter, as though the walls had leaned closer. The candle sputtered, wax dripping like slow tears. And Eleanor's shadow lingered still at the far end of the aisle, her bowed head heavy with sorrow. I whispered aloud, my voice trembling. Who am I to you? The shadow did not answer, but the silence was its own reply. It urged me forward, urged me to seek, to prove what I already feared. So I left the forgotten wing and returned to the archives. The hours blurred. Dust gathered on my sleeves as I rifled through parish records, census rolls, genealogy charts yellowed with age. Names and dates tumbled into my mind, a litany of strangers who might not be strangers at all. My own family tree had always been faint in my memory. Fragments of stories from my grandmother, half-remembered tales of migration and name changes. But now every scrap of that history felt urgent. I began tracing backward. My grandmother, her mother, and her mother before her. And then there it was, an entry in a parish ledger dated 1893. A woman who bore a name I knew only faintly from childhood stories, Clara Whitcomb. She had changed it upon marriage, taking the name of her husband, obscuring the lineage that tied her to a vanished family. Whitcomb. The surname struck me like a thunderclap. I pressed my hands against the table, breathless. Clara Whitcomb, my great-great-grandmother. Eleanor's surname carried through her. Could Clara have been Eleanor's child? The dates aligned with precision too cruel to ignore. Clara born in 1872, the same year Eleanor vanished. No mother's name recorded in the registry. Only the father, unknown. How convenient. How deliberate. The room spun as I pieced it together. Eleanor had disappeared the night before her wedding. The world had called her runaway, cursed, lost. But she had not vanished into nothing. She had left behind a child who was hidden, renamed, disguised by omission. And through that child, her blood had reached me. I gripped the ledger, my vision blurring with the weight of realization. This was no longer history I read about. This was my history. Eleanor was not a ghostly stranger. She was blood. Her sorrow, her vow, her love, it pulsed in me centuries later. I whispered her name again, softer this time. Eleanor. The library seemed to shiver. But if the child survived, as she wrote, then so did the danger. Her warning echoed louder now. They will find you too. I forced myself to return to the letter, desperate for more answers. My candlelight fell across the fragile paper. The ink faded but sharp where her final words had etched themselves. And then I noticed something I had not seen before. In the margins, faint, newer ink. Not Eleanor's hand. Not from the 1800s. The strokes were sharper, darker, as though added decades later by another hand. For words only. The truth is in the graveyard. The breath caught in my throat. It was not just Eleanor who had written to me now. Someone else had carried this secret. Someone who had handled this very page after her. Who had left behind a breadcrumb for me to follow. The graveyard. Which graveyard? Hers? The Whitcombs? Or one nearer, where her child had been buried, hidden, renamed? The candlelight trembled, throwing the letters into stark relief. My pulse quickened. The truth had led me this far, pulling me into shadows, whispers, vows carved in ink. And now it called me again, out of the library, into the earth where bones lay heavy. I lifted my eyes from the page. The silence of the library pressed closer, heavy with expectation. Eleanor's shadow lingered still, watching. And I knew I would have to go to the graveyard, where the truth waited. The words haunted me all through the night. The truth is in the graveyard. They clung to the edge of my vision. They echoed in the silence between my breaths. Sleep had not come, not truly. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Eleanor's face I had never seen, heard her whisper I had never known, felt her plea I could not escape. So when the first gray wash of dawn touched the sky, I rose. The world outside was silent, hushed in the early chill, the mist curling low over the cobbled streets. The air smelled of damp stone and fading night. It was the kind of dawn that feels older than time, when the boundaries between life and death are thinner, when the earth still breathes secrets not yet stolen by the day. The graveyard lay beyond the town, half forgotten on the crest of a hill. The path wound upward past crumbling walls, iron gates rusted and clinging to their hinges. Ivy draped over the stones like a shroud, and the grass was heavy with dew, brushing cold against my shoes as I walked. The silence there was heavier than the libraries, the silence of centuries of bones, of prayers whispered into soil. I moved among the stones, my breath trembling, my eyes scanning the inscriptions. Names long faded, dates so old they might have belonged to another world. The Wickham family had been buried here once, their wealth buying ornate marble and statues of angels, now weathered by rain. But most stones were simple, their words erased by time. And then I saw it. Among the worn graves stood one unlike the others. Its stone was plain, unmarked by any name or date, as if no one had dared to speak who lay beneath. And yet, someone had cared. Fresh wild roses lay at its base, their petals bright against the gray. The earth around the stone had been tended recently, the grass cleared, the soil disturbed. My chest tightened. This was it. This was where the truth lay. I knelt before the stone, my hands brushing away the damp earth. The roses smelled faintly of morning rain, fragile yet defiant. Whoever had left them had done so not long ago, though no one I knew still bore the Wickham name. And then, beneath the edge of the stone, my fingers struck metal. I dug with trembling urgency, my nails catching in the damp soil, until I unearthed a rusted tin box, small and unassuming, its surface eaten away by years. My hand shook as I pried it open. The hinges groaned, the lid scraping against rust, and within lay a folded fragment of paper. It was fragile, yellowed, but the ink within still lived. I unfolded it carefully, the words revealed in Eleanor's hand once more. If you have come this far, then you know my truth, though I tremble to write it. I did not vanish by choice, though the world believes I fled. My fate was sealed the night before the vows they forced upon me. But I could not let them take everything. I could not let them destroy the one life within me. And so I hid what mattered most. The candlelight in my memory seemed to flicker again as I read. Her words were not merely ink. They were breath, they were pulse, they were Eleanor herself bleeding through the years. They searched for me. They searched the halls, the chambers, the grounds. They whispered that I had drowned, that I had run away, that I had been taken by sin or madness. Let them whisper. The truth is different. I was taken, but not by their chains. I was taken by love, by fear, by the need to protect what they would never understand. I swallowed hard, my hand trembling against the page. The mist in the graveyard thickened, curling around the stones like watchful eyes. Her words deepened. If you stand at this grave, then you stand where I once stood, burying what I could not carry. Beneath these stones lie not only the body of a woman, but the fragments of her defiance, hidden in scraps, hidden in silence. You'll one piece now. Others may remain scattered, waiting. And if you are brave enough to seek them, they will lead you to where my story ends and where his begins. The air grew colder, my breath visible. I turned the page, my heart in my throat. Do not fear the whispers that follow you. They are mine. Do not fear the shadows in the corner of your eye. They are me. I linger not for myself, but for the child. Always for the child. Protect them, though you may not know their name. Protect their line, though you may not know their faces. For what hunts me will hunt them, as it now hunts you. The final lines were hurried, jagged, as if her hand had been seized by urgency, by the presence of someone at her door. You will find what remains at the river. Follow the map. It will show you where I last stood, where my choice became my fate. Only there will you see what they tried to erase. And beneath the words, sketched in haste, was a map. The outline of the town, the hills, the graveyard, and beyond it, a winding line for the river, marked with an X. The river. The very river where rumors claimed she had drowned, where whispers said her body had been cast and lost to the current. I traced the ink with my fingertip, my skin cold as though touching not paper, but her very hand. The lines quivered beneath my touch, alive with the urgency of her last plea. The mist coiled thicker around the graveyard, the roses shivering though no wind blew. I lifted my eyes to the unmarked stone, and for a heartbeat, I swore I saw her. Eleanor, standing behind it, her face pale, her eyes hollow with sorrow, her gown drifting like smoke. The paper shook in my hands. The map burned in my mind. The river waited, and with it the truth. The map burned in my mind, the lines sketched in haste, the river's winding path inked with urgency. The X mark there was not simply a place. It was a summons, a confession carved in ink across centuries. Eleanor had led me to the graveyard, to her plea, and now, to the water. By the time the sun had risen fully, I was already walking the path that curved down toward the river outside the town. The air carried a weight, as if the earth itself remembered what had transpired there. Mist hung heavy above the grass, curling low across the stones, wrapping itself around my steps like pale fingers. The closer I came, the stronger the sound grew, the steady rush of water, eternal, unending, a current that had outlived the lives it swallowed. The river appeared suddenly, a wide band of gray flowing between its banks, its surface broken only by ripples and the occasional cry of a bird overhead. It looked ordinary, as rivers often do, but the ordinary can deceive. Beneath its surface lay secrets drowned, whispered, forgotten. I stood at its edge, clutching Eleanor's map, my heart pounding with questions that would not relent. The whispers of history had called this the place of her death. The stories told of a bride who vanished, a woman who drowned. But now I knew more. She had not gone willingly. She had come here with Thomas. The thought of him stirred in my mind again. The man painted a traitor, the man whose name she had written with trembling defiance. He had been her love, her companion, the father of her child, and together they had planned to flee. The river was to be their escape. I closed my eyes, imagining it. The night before the wedding, the halls of the Whitcomb estate silent, her dress prepared, her family sleeping in the illusion of control. Eleanor slipping away, her footsteps quick on the stone, her heart hammering as she carried her secret, her love, her unborn child, toward the darkness of the river. And Thomas, waiting for her, a small boat ready, their hands clasped in desperate hope. But if that had been their plan, why did the records speak of only one body? The whispers of the town had said a corpse was pulled from the current days later, its features unrecognizable, claimed by the water. Some said it was Thomas. Others swore it was Eleanor. The truth had blurred, twisted by rumor until no one knew. Had she drowned that night? Or had Thomas? Or had something darker intervened? A hand that dragged her under? A betrayal? A murder disguised as fate? The water whispered back no answer, only the steady current winding toward horizons unseen. I searched the riverbank, following the lines of the map. The X had been marked at a bend where the current slowed, where reeds grew thick where the ground dipped low. And there, among the roots of an ancient willow that bent mournfully over the water, I saw it. A stone, carved not by nature but by hand, weathered, unmarked, half sunken in the soil. I knelt, brushing away the damp earth. My hands found a hollow beneath the roots, and within it, something cold, metallic. A small tin box, rusted, its edges eaten away by time. My breath caught as I pried it open. Inside lay another fragment of paper, folded tight, preserved by desperation. I unfolded it, my hands trembling, and read Eleanor's words once more. We came here to flee. The night was dark, the river loud, and my heart louder still. Thomas held my hand, his touch steady, though his breath betrayed his fear. We thought we could escape. We thought love could outpace chains. But the world does not let women like me flee so easily. They followed. We heard their shouts, their boots on stone, their torches in the night. We had moments only. The ink blurred where her tears had fallen. Thomas pushed me toward the boat. He begged me to go, to save myself and the child. He swore he would hold them off, that he would follow, that we would meet again downstream. I refused. I clung to him. For what is life without love beside it? But he tore my hand free and pushed me toward the water. I could see it. The night, the torches, the fear. Thomas, desperate to protect her. Eleanor, desperate not to leave him. I remember the river cold against my skin, the current tugging at my gown. I remember his voice shouting my name. And then the sound, the splash, the silence. I turned, and he was gone, taken by the water, or by the men. I do not know which. The page shuddered in my hands. They said only one body was found. Perhaps it was his. Perhaps they claimed it mine. I cannot tell you which truth is the truth, for I was already hidden by then, pulled into the reeds, carried by the current, clinging to life and child. If the world believes I drowned that night, let them. Better a ghost than a prisoner. Better a myth than a bride in chains. Her words pierced me. Eleanor had not drowned. She had escaped. She had chosen survival, for herself and for her child, though at the cost of the man she loved. And yet the doubt lingered. Had Thomas truly died that night? Or had she been deceived, tricked into believing he had? Was his body the one pulled from the current? Or had hers been, while she vanished elsewhere? The river swallowed truth and rumor alike. The letter's last lines trembled with sorrow. I live, but half of me was buried here. I survived, but not whole. My heart lies with him beneath these waters, whether his body rests there or not. If you find this place, then you hold my confession. Know that I loved him until the current carried him away. Know that if I am remembered as drowned, it is not water that killed me, but a world that could not bear our love. The paper tore slightly as I folded it back, my tears blurring the ink as hers once had. The river rushed before me, eternal, unyielding, a witness that refused to speak its truth aloud. I knelt at its edge, the map still in my hand, the water lapping softly against the soil. My reflection wavered in its surface, distorted by ripples, pale in the morning light. And then, slowly, terribly, it changed. The features in the water were not mine. They were hers. Eleanor's face stared back at me from the current, pale as moonlight, her eyes hollow with sorrow, her lips parted as though whispering across the centuries. Her gown floated about her like mist, her hair drifting as if submerged still. The water trembled, and so did I. Her face stared up at me from the river's reflection, pale, sorrowful, her hair drifting as if she were still submerged. My breath caught in my throat. The ripples moved across her features like tears, but her eyes were steady, fixed on mine with a gravity that rooted me to the bank. I wanted to look away to break the spell, but I could not. Her gaze held me. The current seemed to pause, and in that silence, her voice rose, not in the air, but within me, as if the water itself carried her words into my veins. I did not drown. The reflection quivered as the words sank into me. My pulse pounded. The world, tilting as truth, began to crack the shell of rumor. The river carried me away, but not to death. I clung to its banks, hidden among the reeds, my body heavy with exhaustion, my heart broken with fear. They searched, but they did not find me. For to the world, I had already drowned. They needed no proof, only silence. Better a vanished bride than a scandalous one. Better a ghost than a daughter who defied them. I trembled, the water cold against my fingers. Her voice filled the stillness, sharp with memory, heavy with pain. I lived, but not free. I lived in hiding, hunted by whispers and shame. And then, the cruelest wound of all, they took my child. The reflection blurred, as though tears had fallen into the water itself. I carried them within me through fear and darkness. But when the hour came, when pain split me open and life screamed into the world, they were taken from my arms. Not by strangers, but by blood, by my family. The Whitcombs silenced me and buried me, but they kept the child hidden, renamed, raised in secrecy. Not for love, not for care, but for reputation. To preserve what little of their pride remained. My name was cursed, erased from their lips. But my blood remained. Passed into hands that denied me, but carried me all the same. The river's current shuddered, dark and restless. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breath, but her words lodged deep within me. She had survived, but at the cost of her child. A mother robbed, a lover torn from her arms, condemned to haunt silence while her bloodline lived on. Her voice deepened. They cursed me. They told the world I drowned, that I ran, that I shamed them beyond forgiveness. And so my name rotted, remembered only as scandal, as sin. But it was never death I feared. It was forgetting. It was silence. That is why I wrote. That is why I linger still. To keep truth alive. The reflection trembled again, and for a heartbeat I saw her more clearly than ever. Her pale face, her hollow eyes, her gown soaked as though forever bound to the river. And in that fragile vision, I saw not only her pain, but something more. Recognition. Her voice softened, weighted now with intimacy. You carry me. You carry Thomas. You carry our blood. Do you not see? You are mine. The air caught in my lungs. The words cut through me, undeniable, inevitable. I thought of the genealogy records of Clara Whitcomb, my great-great-grandmother. I thought of the absence of names in the registry, of the whispered omissions, of my own family's reluctance to speak of the past. It had been there all along, hidden but alive. I was not simply a reader who stumbled across a forgotten letter. I was her legacy, her bloodline. I whispered into the dawn air, my voice trembling. Eleanor, you are my ancestor. The water rippled, and her reflection smiled. Not with joy, but with sorrow, the kind of smile born of both pride and unbearable grief. Yes, my love, my tragedy, my silence, all of it runs in you. You are what they tried to erase. Proof that I survived, proof that love outlived their chains. But with it comes burden, with it comes curse. The river swelled, the current darkening, the mist thickening around me. For what hunted me, what destroyed me, what stole my child, it does not rest. It has followed through generations. It watched Clara, it watched those after her, and now it watches you. The words struck like a blade. My skin prickled, the mist pressing against me, as if hands lingered just out of sight. I looked down once more, desperate, terrified, my pulse racing. Her face in the water leaned closer, her voice a whisper sharp enough to cut through the veil of dawn. But one of them still watches you. The reflection shattered as the river's surface rippled violently, breaking her features into fragments. I stumbled back from the bank, the paper in my hand trembling, my breath ragged. The silence returned, but it was no longer silence. It was presence. Something unseen lingered still, its gaze upon me, its patience endless. And I knew then, Eleanor's story was not simply a tale of the past. It was unfolding still, through me, around me. The river's reflection had shattered, and with it, Eleanor's face dissolved back into the current. But her words, her final whisper, still burned through me like fire through dry wood. One of them still watches you. I cannot escape it. Every shadow I passed seemed heavier. Every corner of silence charged with an unseen presence. The blood in my veins felt older than myself, carrying her sorrow, her tragedy, her vow. And yet, as dawn gave way to day, I found my steps pulling me back to the place where it had all begun, the library. That cathedral of silence, where dust clung to forgotten stories and sunlight filtered through stained glass like shards of frozen fire. Where the copy of Pride and Prejudice had first offered me its secret. Where her letter had slipped loose as though time itself had chosen me. I needed to see it again, to hold the book, to feel the weight of her words pressed between the pages. Perhaps to convince myself that all of it had been real. That Eleanor Whitcomb, the missing bride of London, the forbidden lover, the vanished mother, had truly reached across centuries to speak to me. The library greeted me with its familiar hush. My footsteps echoed across the marble floor as I climbed the staircase, each creak of the wood louder than it had ever seemed. I reached the far corner, the arched window, the table where candlelight had once made her words breathe anew. But the book was gone. The table lay bare, the dust unbroken, except for a single torn scrap of paper. My heart stopped. I moved closer, each step heavier, slower, as if approaching an altar. The scrap trembled in the faint light, its edges frayed, its surface thin as though it had fought to remain through the erosion of years. My hand hovered above it before daring to touch. The words were few, but they struck with the weight of a lifetime. Do not forget me, for you are the ending of my story. I read them once, twice, a dozen times, until the words burned against my eyes, until I could not tell whether they lived on the page or in my mind. I am the ending of her story, not the world, not the family that buried her, not the whispers of London that cursed her name, not the history books that forgot her. Me, her blood, her descendant, her witness, the weight of it pressed down until I thought my chest would shatter. I was not meant merely to find her letter. I was meant to complete it, to be the last line she could not write. My hands shook as I held the scrap, the words trembling in the air. And then, before my eyes, the ink began to fade, slowly, relentlessly, like mist burning off in morning light. The strokes thinned, the black dissolved into brown, then paled further, until the paper bore nothing but silence. I gasped, clutching it tighter, but no grip could hold against time. The scrap itself withered, its fibers breaking, its edges curling. And then, as though centuries finally claimed their due, it crumbled into dust in my palm. I stood frozen, my hand outstretched, the remains of Eleanor's final line drifting down onto the bare wooden table. Dust, that was all that remained of her words, her plea, her voice. And yet, not all, for even as the paper vanished, the echo of her words lingered in me. They clung to my heart, etched into my blood as if they had always been waiting there. Do not forget me. The air in the library grew heavy, as though the silence itself leaned close to listen. The stained glass above dimmed, the light turning gray. I thought I heard her then, not in ink, not in reflection, but in the marrow of my bones. A sigh, a whisper, a breath of eternity. Love, pain, defiance. Her story had not ended in the river, nor in the graveyard, nor in the dust of forgotten archives. It ended here, in me. I closed my eyes, and in that moment I understood. Eleanor's tragedy was not only hers. It was mine. Her love and her loss had rippled through generations, woven into the blood that brought me here. Her defiance had become my inheritance. Her unfinished letter had become my duty. The silence stretched on, deep and infinite. I felt the weight of centuries press against my shoulders. I felt her presence retreat, not vanished, but resting, as though her final words had been spoken at last. My eyes opened. The table lay bare. No book, no letter, no scrap, only dust. The library seemed unchanged, but I was not. I lingered for what felt like hours, the hush around me now sacred, the walls echoing not with silence, but with her memory. Finally, as the light faded into dusk, I rose. At the threshold of the library, I turned once more. The empty table gleamed faintly beneath the window. And I knew it was not empty at all. It was full of what words cannot hold. I stepped into the night. The fire in me had dimmed to embers, but it glowed still, carrying her voice, her vow, her plea. Eleanor Whitcomb, forgotten by the world, but not by me. And so I tell you this story now, by firelight, as the shadows gather and the night presses close. I tell you because her words demand to be heard, because her truth will not be buried again. Do not forget her. Do not forget the love that defied chains. Do not forget the river that carried both death and survival. Do not forget the roses that bloom on unmarked graves. Do not forget the voice that whispered across centuries to beg one last mercy. Do not forget me, for you are the ending of my story. The flames before me crackle low, shadows bending along the walls. The night grows colder. The tale is done. And yet it lingers, for some stories do not end when the words fade. Some stories breathe, still in the spaces between silence. And that, my friend, is why some books are never truly finished. And so, the last of Eleanor's words have faded into dust, but not into silence. Her love, her sorrow, her tragedy, they linger still in the air around us, in the blood that remembers, in the hearts of those who choose not to forget. Some stories end on paper, others end in graves. But this one breathes on in you. If her voice has touched you, If her pain has whispered to something hidden inside your own soul, then carry her with you. Keep her alive by sharing her story, by letting her name travel further than the walls that once tried to silence it. And know this: Eleanor's letter may have closed, but countless more voices wait in the shadows, in forgotten books, in drawers long sealed, in places where time has hidden truths too powerful to die. If you would walk deeper into those mysteries, if you would hear the letters the world never delivered, then stay close. Leave your thoughts in the comments, share this tale with someone who hungers for wonder, and most of all, subscribe. Because here, every lost voice will one day be heard again. After all, some books are never truly finished.